Hey guys, this is Jimmy coming at you with another video for you guys today. So in my Wrestling Reimagining series for WCW 1999, I will be tackling the March pay-per-view event Uncensored. Now, Uncensored would be the prelude to what WWE would eventually produce with their Extreme Rules pay-per-views, in a sense that for every match featured on the show would mostly consist of no disqualifications, no countouts, and even Falls Count Anywhere to some degree. And Uncensored happened to be one of those WCW pay-per-views that emphasize on that kind of motif. And so, for instance, like you would have like a cage match, for instance, and you would have maybe like a dog collar chain match or a Texas tornado match. Something along those lines, as far as like those kinds of match stipulations that would notably be featured throughout Uncensored. It was actually a very, very weird show. I mean, it wasn't necessarily, like, it wasn't all around terrible, but it wasn't all around great either. Like, for instance, the World Tag Title match between Benoit Malenko and along with Curt Hennig and Barry Windham was actually kind of a hidden gem that for some reason doesn't ever get brought up in wrestling discussions. But you had that, you had the Cruiserweight match, and then you had like the infamous main event with Hogan and Flair in that cage match that was booked very oddly, considering that Flair had been the babyface and he was WCW president. He was willing to take matters in his own hands, doing everything he could to thwart off the NWO, but now all of a sudden he's resorting to doing some dirty deeds. Like, he paid off the referee officiating the match to screw Hogan, even though Hogan was the heel. But now all of a sudden Hogan's kind of being looked at as a sympathetic babyface, especially given the fact that this was the same group that assaulted Ric Flair and just completely humiliating him. And now like Flair's, he'll go off the deep end for sure, but the fact that Flair is just all of a sudden kind of looked out as this bad guy just didn't really make sense to me. And, they kind of booked like Hogan to be out to be like a babyface fighting with honor. And, and like I was discussing about Ric Flair paying off the referee, which, turned out to be Charles Robinson. So this kind of led to this double turn that ensued in that cage match that they had. And it was like a first blood match, but then even despite Flair bleeding first, but the match still continued, and it was just an awful round mess. This was during the time when WrestleMania season was already approaching. Like, it was only a few weeks away, and you had Rock and Stone Cold main eventing, like the hottest main event in WrestleMania, even for quite a long time. Having like the hottest guy in the wrestling being Stone Cold, and The Rock, who's starting to come into his own as a main eventer. So, the WWF was really young and hungry when it came to their talent. And WCW was just kind of, it's been beaten the head time and again that they've been relying on the same stars and aging veterans that have been wrestling for decades. And, Hogan and Flair had fought like several times. Like, they were basically pretending like it was 1994 again, but this was already 5 years later, and, Hogan starting to, show signs of being a babyface and going back to his old ways, and same goes with Ric Flair. Yeah, I mean, Uncensored 99, I mean, if you look in retrospect, it was sort of kind of like the beginning of the end. So what you need to know going into this event, so there will be 2 title changes. One of the more notable ones happens to be on the Nitro after Super Brawl. Booker T defeats Bret Hart in the middle of the ring to become the new United States Heavyweight Champion. So that was a match that they did in actuality after Super Brawl, was that one-on-one match between Booker and Bret just really making Booker T look out to be like $1 million. I mean, it was a very big victory in his career up to this point, and I want to, maintain faith to the actual timeline. Only difference is that Bret Hart's still U.S. champion in this scenario, so this would mean even more, not only defeating a veteran superstar like Bret Hart, but also having Booker T win a championship belt in the process. His brother, Stevie Ray, having been booted out of the NWO not too long prior, So in a shocking upset, Stevie Ray defeats Scott Steiner to become the new television champion. So now Harlem Heat has some gold to share together. So a pretty big moment, and announcers will let it be known at that. So with that being said, we might as well just kind of dive into my card here. So let's get started. So for the Cruiserweight title, I have Billy Kidman going as the champion, and he's defending the belt against Mikey Whipwreck. This was actually pretty shocking to me because, Mikey Whipwreck, making his name known in ECW, comes over to WCW, which was actually caught me by surprise since I don't necessarily have any memories of Mikey being in this company. And it may have been just for a cup of coffee. And this was actually a match that did happen in the actual Uncensored 99 show, so I'm definitely going to keep it at that. And I mean, it was still a pretty wonderful match, so not necessarily a match that I need to reiterate. And Kidman's going to walk out of the match still the Cruiserweight champion, and he hits that shooting star press that he does. So then we get to our second match, which will be Finlay going one-on-one against Scott Norton. Now, this is basically like a thrown-in-together match. I mean, WCW was pretty infamous for booking these kinds of matches, especially some of these undercard matches that just don't have any stakes or anything like that, or don't have any like a build up to it for that matter. But just like having these two tough men just kind of duke it out. Scott Norton made a name for himself in New Japan, and even winning the IWGP Heavyweight title at a time. There was definitely something very special with him, and it's a very shame that WCW never really pulled the trigger on him. And one of the reasons being of how big the talent was, as far as the WCW roster is concerned, and there was just only so many people you could push at a time. So Norton kind of got lost in the shuffle. So he would be like a lower tier member of the NWO, but there was also something really special about him, and just the timing just wasn't right. And I would have Scott Norton go over Finlay in this match. Now we get to our Falls Count Anywhere match, and I have Bam Bigelow going one-on-one against the recently debuting Sandman, or in WCW they refer to him as Hack. Now, much like Mikey Whipwreck, another ECW alumni that was in the company, and the interesting thing though is that Hack, or Sandman, being in WCW was to jumpstart a hardcore evolution, which would eventually lead to WCW creating their own hardcore division that was very successful in the WWF. So they were really willing to capitalize on that. But much like Mikey, so Sandman was also in the company for a short amount of time, so it was just there for a cup of coffee. Blink and you missed it. But it seemed like Sandman actually had a pretty decent push during this time. But fortunately, I guess things didn't work out for him in WCW, so eventually he went back home to ECW. So Bam just came off of a big loss to Goldberg, so we could have Bam just bounce back and have him just go over some lower tier guys just to get back some of that momentum. You could have Hack debut from the crowd, and he just ambushes Bam from behind, and just really making a statement that that WCW's in a need for a hardcore revolution. He came from the land of extreme, and so he's willing to make that statement by challenging a similar wrestler of that nature. They end up having this match. I would have Hack go over Bam in his pay-per-view debut. You would have like maybe cookie sheets, steel chairs, a Singapore cane, being that's the signature weapon for Sandman, or Hack in this case. So yeah, definitely just have them go balls to the walls, a lot of outside brawling. We could have like a spot at the end of the match where Bam Bigelow looks to go for a moonsault, and Hack's laying on top of a table, but then Hack out of nowhere just gets out of the table. He gets back up. He knocks Bam with the Singapore cane. Maybe even do like a back suplex from the top rope on the table to get the 3 count, so Hack could win in his pay-per-view debut match against the Beast from the East. And now we get to our World Tag Team title bout, and we have the LWO consisting of Psicosis and Juventud Guerrera. And they'll be taking on another set of ECW guys with Perry Saturn and Raven. Now, I know some people are asking, it's like, where's Chris Kanyon in this scenario? Now, it turns out when I was researching this that Kanyon took some time off to work on shooting a movie. And he was actually like a stunt coordinator. I believe he did some stunt coordinator for the Ready to Rumble movie with David Arquette a year later. Raven was just kind of floundering at this point, so I decided to just have him pair up with at least another partner that he has history with, that being Perry Saturn. And granted, this wasn't long ago when Saturn and Raven were duking it out and having Saturn being the one to break up the flock and leaving Raven kind of like as a man without a country. But he did have Chris Kanyon by his side for a time, but now he's like MIA. It seems random, but there wasn't really a lot of depth to the tag team division even at this point. So I'm really trying to make the most out of the roster that was available to me. Much like the previous match, expect a lot of weapon usage, and given Juvi and Psicosis' background in Lucha Libre, so we're going to expect a lot of fast-paced action and high spots, and juxtaposed with all the hardcore, the hardcore wrestling that Raven and Saturn are best known for doing. I would have Guerrera and Psicosis go over in this match. Raven and Saturn try to put up a hell of a fight, but even that wouldn't be enough. The LWO will be the one coming out there with the last laugh. So we would have Guerrero and Psicosis still your World Tag Team Champions. Now we get to our submission match between Scott Steiner and Ric Flair. So basically, earlier on in the video, I discussed about Scott Steiner losing the TV title to Stevie Ray. So what would have happened is that, because what happened at Super Brawl, where Ric Flair was in the middle of his program with Hogan, and then Steiner came out there and assaulted Ric Flair, having a hand in being the reason why he ended up losing that match. Steiner's been making all these promos even prior to that, just willing to issue a challenge against Flair, but Flair's just, preoccupied because of Hogan and, due to the fact that Steiner's just a foul mouth that just wants all the attention. So Flair's just, even then, even if he wasn't preoccupied with Hogan, he's like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. Super Brawl happens, Steiner makes his presence known, gets under Flair's skin, and now he's just had enough. And now you also have to factor in is that that his son David had been attacked, and combined with all the emotions that are just running through the mind of Ric Flair. So these factors combined really has Flair out for revenge. And on an episode of Nitro where Steiner defends his belt against Stevie. So there would be interference from the NWO guys, but also given that Booker and Stevie by this point would have eventually patched things up. And so, Booker would come out there and try to do his best to fend them off. And then out of nowhere, Ric Flair comes out there, attacks Scott Steiner. Stevie Ray goes for like a slapjack, goes for the cover. He becomes the new television champion. So he and Booker T have some gold that they could share together. So just a pretty touching moment. And this doesn't sit well with Steiner. So, he's kind of pissed because of the fact that has his position as WCW president. So, he's admittingly showing that he could be a little biased at times. But to avoid the problem from happening again, so Flair decides to temporarily step down from his role as WCW president, and in that role would be none other than J.J. Dillon. Flair decides to bring back J.J. Dillon just for a short time while Flair takes matters in his own hands, going one-on-one against Scott Steiner. But being that this is uncensored, so no DQ, anything goes. So we're going to make this a submission match. So Scott Steiner with the Steiner recliner, Ric Flair with the figure four. So we make that known. Just having these two guys just emphasize more on some in-ring psychology. Maybe have Ric Flair just work the leg on Steiner, and Steiner just utilizing some rest holds, choke holds. maybe even like utilizing like I want to say like a dog collar chain or like a bull rope or something that would that you would think having a wrestler use that object to choke out the life of their opponent. So something along to that effect. And yeah, we're definitely going to expect a lot of the emphasis on submission holds. So maybe cases where Flair tries to go for a figure four and then Steiner fights out of it. Or maybe like Ric Flair does try and look like he's all the way in, locked in. And then Steiner utilizes like a foreign object and just knocks Ric Flair out and discontinuing the submission hold. Building up that kind of suspense. So it's definitely going to be like a hard-fought bout, without a doubt. And one of the high-profile matches that I featured on the card so far. But eventually, Scott Steiner will go over Ric Flair in this match. So we could have him use the Steiner recliner on Flair. And maybe even using that dog collar chain that I discussed. So maybe utilizing that to his advantage. And really putting over Scott Steiner as a potential superstar in the making. And now we move over to the U.S. title match. And we have the champion going in, Booker T, defending the belt against Curt Hennig. Now, this is based on what happened when Booker T defeated Bret Hart in one of the biggest wins of his career, and also winning the U.S. title in the process. After this, Bret Hart did take some time off for a bit. And so, unfortunately, I would have done this at Uncensored, but, since Bret Hart had to undergo some surgery during this time, so, he was kind of on and off WCW programming during the spring and summer of '99 and expressing some dissatisfaction with the company. So, decided to have, Booker T take on his former rival, that being Curt Hennig. Booker T, he spent a good majority of this decade holding the tag team title belts with his brother on a multiple amount of occasions. So by the time the end of the decade rolls around, he'd been holding the TV title. He's been branching out in singles and really coming to his own. And like I discussed, he became the new U.S. champion. Curt Hennig kind of goes on the mic and just basically trashes Booker T, bringing up their past history as far as Hennig's relationship with Bret Hart's concerned, because given that these guys, even early on in the decade, were really tearing it up for the IC title. Now, you don't necessarily have to mention about that title belt, but just mention the fact that Bret and Curt have their history. The thing here is that he blames Booker for driving Bret away from TV and supposedly destroying his love for wrestling, and that you crushed his spirit, and he doesn't forgive Booker for that. And so even though Hennig and Bret had their differences in the past, but now he comes to respect Bret for his sportsmanship and his technical prowess, he looks to bring the U.S. title belt back to the NWO, and what a way to do it by taking on Booker T. This is going to be a match that will at least hopefully be a solid match. I know Hennig was kind of, getting up there in age at this point, but, he still could go. So I just needed someone to kind of have Booker T to, work a potentially good match. Like a seasonal veteran like Curt Hennig could really do wonders. He will retain the U.S. title belt here by defeating Hennig and using the Harlem Hangover in order to secure a victory. Now we get to the second to last match on the card, and I have DDP taking on Hollywood Hogan. So this will be sort of like a last man standing match, although WCW wouldn't refer to it as such, but it could be like a sudden death match, whatever they like to refer to their last man standing matches. DDP just coming off of a big loss against Kevin Nash, and he's just feeling gutted to have been coming this close to bringing the WCW title back home to where it belongs. For years, he spent busting his ass off in the weight room, and having been a manager, throughout a majority of his wrestling career, failing to capture the gold on a number of occasions. DDP starts contemplating as to where his position lies in the WCW totem pole. So then, at some point, Hulk Hogan interrupts. he goes on to say that the people moved on from DDP. He's a shell of his former self. And, Page kind of rebuttals, goes on this argument for the record that the people, or like the former people that, being former Hulkamaniacs, have moved on from the Hulkster. And so who's to say that he's the only has-been in the ring? Because the war between WCW and the NWO has just been an ongoing saga, has no end in sight. And DDP, acknowledges that for the record. So, like with everything in life, mortality exists. All living organisms have a shelf life, and only so much time in the world that we could make the most of before we pass on. It's only going to be a matter of time before the NWO reaches to a boiling point in which that they'll eventually implode. DDP and Hogan, they're squaring off. The last man standing match being that there's no pinfalls, no submissions, no countouts, anything goes. The only way to win the match is to leave your opponent incapacitated until the referee counts to 10, and for that person to win the match by being the only man left standing. So I would have DDP go over Hogan in this match, and so you'll expect typical NWO interference. DDP does his best to take them all out. And just when things kind of look pretty bleak, so Hogan's going to find a way to use this time to pull the match back in his favor. Pummel down DDP with some weapons. We have Bam Bam Bigelow coming out there. And I don't know, some people are wondering, it's like, why is Bam Bam interfering in this match? So if you go back to the ending of my Sold Out video, where I discussed DDP coming out there to scare off Bam Bam Bigelow after that Goldberg-Scott Hall match where Bam Bam's attacking Goldberg, and then DDP just coming out there and chasing Bam Bam through the crowd. So what would have happened is that, let's say on like Nitro, DDP and Bam Bam Bigelow go on one-on-one. And so they have a match. It's like a number one contenders match where DDP would eventually win in order to get a shot against Kevin Nash's world title. But it would have been by disqualification when Kevin Nash and the NWO assault DDP. And Bam Bam's like really furious because not only that this match ended abruptly, but like he just felt like his chances of winning, like especially getting an opportunity at a title, were stripped away from him. And so Bam Bam also kind of has some score to settle with Kevin Nash, and we could have that happen maybe like the week after that. Like DDP just coming out attacking Kevin Nash, and DDP and Bam Bam just kind of stare at each other, just kind of like have this sort of, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but there just seems to be kind of like tension going on with DDP and Bam Bam. The announcers are like questioning as to where they're, like if there's some kind of like connection going on that we just don't seem to understand. So that's also kind of like a bit of a side story that goes on. So Bam Bam would have helped out DDP, and he's like attacking all the NWO guys. DDP would find a way to secure a victory, and maybe something along the lines like have Hogan try to go for brass knuckles, and then like DDP deflects it, and then maybe he does like a diamond cutter like on the steel steps, barely making it all the way back up just when the referee makes that 10 count. So allowing DDP to pick up a victory from there, and just really building up that kind of like suspense of a match. Make it seem like Hogan might have this match won, but unfortunately things just didn't go in his favor, and DDP just found a way to turn the complexion of the bout back to his side. So we would have Diamond Dallas Page going over in a pretty big win. And now we get to the main event, and this is a barbed wire steel cage match for the World Heavyweight title. So we have Kevin Nash as the reigning world champion going one-on-one against Goldberg. The anticipated rematch from Starrcade ends up happening here at Uncensored, with a steel cage surrounding the ring to ensure that there's no interference from the NWO. Long story short, we all know the story of what happened at Starrcade. Kevin Nash defeated Goldberg in one of the most shocking wins. They end up having a rematch on the January 4th show, which ends in DQ thanks to the NWO interference, particularly NWO Hollywood. Hulk Hogan comes out there. No one's seen or heard from him in about a month or so. Just when Goldberg had Kevin Nash beat, and the referee's making that count. So Hogan just clubs Goldberg with the world title. Kevin Nash is like really furious, and they have, Nash and Hogan have a showdown. And so the crowd just goes crazy. The announcers are like, oh my gosh, it's Nash and Hogan crossing paths again. It's the leader of the Wolfpack, the leader of Hollywood. They're going to go toe to toe. Nash, Hogan have this little tug of war with the world title. Kevin Nash has the world title taken away from Hogan. So by the time Goldberg tries getting back up, so Kevin Nash out of nowhere just clubs Goldberg with the world title. And after a bit of like a stare down between Nash and Hogan, so they end up laughing and they end up like embracing a hug. So then the NWO comes out, everyone except Luger and Conan. So pretty much just the NWO Hollywood alone, just all unite with Kevin Nash and Hogan in the middle of the ring. No Scott Hall either, since Flair would have barred him from interfering in the match. So just those NWO members. Eventually, we get the two factions reuniting once again. Kevin Nash, being the world champion that he is, spent the next few months just showing why he is world champion, that he could show that he could fight his own battles, like even going back to like Super Brawl when he fought DDP. So now he's looking to do the same with Goldberg to show that he can defeat Goldberg fair and square inside the steel cage. Really try to prove that he is not only a giant killer, but he's also a street killer, and that his victory over Goldberg wasn't a fluke. So, and as far as Goldberg's concerned, because he's like really furious over the fact that he hasn't even gotten the world title shot since, January 4th, where the two matches, like obviously losing the world title at Starrcade, but also on the January 4th show where it looked like Goldberg had Nash beat. But once again, shenanigans happened and Goldberg's moment was completely ruined. It was taken away from him, the world title, not once, but twice. And, he had to plow through all the guys that screwed him over in the first place, like notably Scott Hall, Bam Bigelow, and even a squash match against Disco Inferno on an episode of Nitro or Thunder. A match would take place between Goldberg and Hogan, that if Goldberg could defeat Hulk Hogan in the middle of the ring, then Goldberg would get his world title shot against Kevin Nash. And so Goldberg does just that, destroys Hulk Hogan in their first match since July. And so giving him his opportunity to face Kevin Nash in a return bout from the previous two encounters that they had. So Uncensored happens. We're just going to have Goldberg and Nash just take matters in their own hands. They're going to utilize the steel fence to their advantage. They're going to slam each other into the fence. So yeah, basically kept the main event somewhat the same, like having the steel cage match being the one to close out the show. Kevin Nash would try and go for like a snake eyes, and then Goldberg could like counter it, shoves Nash to the steel fence. Nash is staggering. He's busted wide open. Goldberg bounces off the ropes, hits a spear. Crowd cheers. Goldberg does his signature pose that sets him up for the jackhammer. Eventually executes that move to perfection. The referee makes that 3 count. Goldberg becomes the new world heavyweight champion. And, after 3 months of all the hell that Goldberg's went through, he's finally brought the gold back to WCW. This is basically my card for Uncensored 99. Let me know what you all guys think. Did you like the card? Are there some matches that you would definitely look forward to? Just feel free to comment down in the comment section below. Stay tuned as I will book the April pay-per-view Spring Stampede. Thank you all guys for watching, and until next time, this is Jimmy signing out.